it's really it's just wild to see, like I was mentioning earlier, to see what's happened to this game. Oh, and we're getting started. Speaking very briefly of what happened, we had I believe it was Baco took the world record down to 37.12, and then ohon took it to 37.11, and then Fatso just 37.8. But already right off the bat here, we got two different routes. We have Bright first and Pharaoh first. Riley going for Pharaoh and ohon going for Bright. We've seen a lot of Bright first action recently with all the runners that have come back to the game for the tournament. It's a solid route. Pharaoh's faster by only about 6 seconds. Bright's pretty consistent. And depending on, things have to go really right to get that 6 seconds as well. So they're both perfectly fine. You'll see why it's a little bit easier for our Bright first runners when they get to Pharaoh second. And we'll see what Riley gets down with in Bright stage, which he's going to do second. You get the weapon here and the balloon, which you use to save some time in the Bright stage when you do it second.
Yeah, Pharaoh is faster by enough that all the top runners just use it universally. Some holdouts were still going Bright first, but like ohon until recently, but he had switched to Pharaoh too. But at some point during the tournament, he switched back to Bright, which, well, it makes sense. Like the jump over the pit in Pharaoh is pretty scary. Unless your movement is absolutely on point so that you can consistently beat the fly, which, well, we can look at it when ohon gets to the spot in a minute from now. But yeah, Bright kind of takes out the danger and randomness of that, and a few seconds is a fairly low price to pay for that.
Yeah, for sure. You can get under a really bad bug drop in Pharaoh and Pharaoh first, but it's really, really scary, and definitely in a race setting, something that can be really, really, really scary.
Yeah, I mean, here we have. It's not frame perfect or anything, even I've pulled it off, but it's really hard to do consistently. It requires extremely good movement, so it's even if you can get it pretty reliably, which I believe ohon would, it's still kind of an unnecessary risk, because it's very costly if you fall down.
Yeah, for sure. There's even like times like that strat, and I'd say like the short cricket jump and Bright are both strats that you can get pretty consistent, but even in a race setting, you're like, it could go wrong, even if like 9 times out of 10 or whatever, in a PB grind, it's different, but it can definitely get scary in a race. But here we have ohon going into Pharaoh second. We're going to see the first use of the Flash Stopper. Flash Stopper is a pretty powerful weapon. If you want to talk about that, Polari.
Yeah, so in later Mega Man games, you can see the menu is really slow, and generally Mega Buster is pretty good. So there are fairly few opportunities to make use of any special weapons, but Flash Stopper and Balloon get used a ton during the Mega Man 4 run, and as you can see on ohon screen, it just freezes everything. It's on a timer, but for some reason, when you're sliding, the timer doesn't count down. So in screens where you can continue to slide all through, it just lasts forever. So that jump that we were mentioning at the end of the first screen, there's no fly when you have Flash Stoppered it out. So, and while I was talking about that on the other screen, notriley has died twice, which is pretty bad against ohon.
Yeah, the dying in the first screen, I mean, if you're gonna die, it's nice to be able to die in a place where it doesn't feel like it's gonna, destroy a lot of your time, like right before checkpoint. But as you said, in at this level of the race, that's a pretty big dent. I mean, but it's still early. There's still a lot of game and a lot of dangerous things to happen, a lot of RNG. ohon's a very consistent player, but if you're gonna die and die twice in a row, it could be worse. So I could see him coming back in a strong way if he plays well.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. The first screen death is pretty cheap. Like, if ohon does make a mistake and does it at one of the worst spots, he can lose more time to a single mistake than notriley just lost to his 2. But yeah, earlier on, a lot of races tend to get decided by who makes the mistake that costs 2 minutes, and that's kind of it single-handedly. But we're down to a stage where people are just absurdly consistent. Like, ohon gets, I don't know if I've seen him post 39 ever, and he gets 37s routinely. So against that, you gotta be worried. Even losing, like, I wonder how much it was, like 20, 30 seconds maybe.
Yeah, it's wild to me that since the tournament started, we've seen like so many 372Xs just like on the regular coming out of people. So it's just insane what's been going on. So yeah, ohon's just a really strong player. No, not just for Mega Man, but for everything he plays. Very, very good. And Riley's been working on this game for quite some time and has grown like just tremendously. He'd been running the game longer than I had, and been at a higher level of skill longer than I had. And then coming up to the tournament, like he was, or not the tournament, but the relay at GDQ, he was just working super hard and built a tremendous amount of skill. And I mean, it definitely shows. He plays very, very well.
Yeah, I've been kind of thinking like, but what year is this? Because ohon used to be just absolutely dominant in all the Mega Man games. I remember when I started speedrunning, we had this like a comparison sheet Joka was making. And it was like Team ohon versus Team rest of the world. And ohon's combined PBs across Mega Man 1 through 6 were faster than everyone else's best combined, which is just wild. And since then, other people have caught up. Like, we should look at ohon doesn't really like grinding one game forever. He just gets a good time he's happy with and moves on and ends up being like somewhere lower, top 10 or so. But here we're playing Mega Man 4 and it's ohon taking a world record again and just dominating everyone in the tournament. Like, some things just never change, I guess.
Yeah, it is mind-blowing to me to see as a younger speedrunner who kind of really grew up in this game as far as the level of skill that I built, like having all these people, these titans come to the game and just seeing them just immediately just play on this crazy level is just fascinating. It's super cool, and it's been just dramatic, like ohon getting the world record in his qualifier session for the tournament, not even the main phase of the tournament, but the qualifier. So it's just absolutely wild. As fun as it is to talk about the lore, we can definitely, I mean, it's a best of 3, so we can definitely get into stuff like that. But we have ohon taking out Ringman. We'll see Riley take it on too. It's a fixed fight in that it should be the same thing every time. There are quite a few fights like that in this, and it's a pretty fun one. Riley taking out those Saturns there, doing a quick little double kill. You'll see a lot of taking out enemies like that to reduce lag and picking up drops, especially in this stage coming up here that ohon's going into as the infamous lag room. Because it's the lag room. It lags that bad. That's what it does.
I think ohon uses flash stopper here. Do you remember? Yeah, he does.
Yeah, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, like there are 3 alternative strats here in these rooms and that are like within a second or 2 from each other or something. And flash is well, it's pretty easy. You can see that there's not much going on here. You could also stay on Buster and switch to Ring earlier. The fastest strat here is Pharaoh Shot, which isn't that hard. Like, it's not as much of a risk than the Pharaoh first screen that we were talking about. Sorry?
Oh, I said I think it's more sad. I feel like Pharaoh first is more fun for me personally. And it's not too hard. It's a little specific because you have to do some different stuff with the inputs, like hitting the enemies, but it's not too bad, and it's slightly faster, which is cool. And Riley took an unfortunate death to Ringman, so this stuff is costly as we see ohon tearing through the crushers, playing how he plays. There's a movement in here that I've heard called the ohon slide, coming on this ladder that ohon's doing right there, where you do the little, I believe, the frame perfect slide, like right at the top of the ladder, and do a little jump up to that platform. Fun to try and practice, but I can't imagine just like going for something like that, being on pace or in a race setting or something.
Yeah, I'm not actually familiar with it, but I assume that if you fail it, you just get some awkward movement and it's not like you die. Or am I mistaken?
Yeah, you could probably pull back from it reasonably. It's kind of like even with that Met kill there, like if you're holding up, like you'll catch the ladder. I don't think it's so bad that you would like lose everything over it, but you don't want to get too cheeky with it, I don't think. I mean, at least I don't like to in certain, like if I'm like 5 seconds ahead, I'm like, yeah, I'll just play a little.
Yeah, I just figured it's like, the the risk is obviously a huge factor in what strats you go for. Like if you get something 1 out of 4 times, but it costs hardly anything to try, then like might as well. Like if you feel like it. So
right. So if it is the juice worth the squeeze kind of thing, risk reward.
Meanwhile, ohon doing the only zip in the run. I don't know. Like I feel weird like explaining all the strats because it's not even my first time in the commentary, and we have cast like how many, like almost 30 matches already here. I'm sure people have watching at this point. Most of them have already heard the explanation for various tricks, and I don't actually really know as much what to talk about, like what's going on in the race. Like I tend to default to just talking about the tricks, since I don't have anything else to talk about. But I've been trying to like focus on something other than the basic speedrun strats here.
I think it's okay. You know, it's an old sales trick that like when you got to make your pitch, you have to imagine that you're doing it for the first time every time for every customer ever or whatever. And we got like, you know, almost 500 people in here, so this could be the first time seeing Mega Man 4 ever for like, you know, maybe 300 of them. So
yeah, fair.
You know, even though there are some people that are, you know, really privy to the game, you know, stuff like even like the flash stopper right now, it's broken in this game. Like the timer for it normally runs out after 5 seconds, I believe, but when you're sliding, the timer for it to run out doesn't go down. So you can just pretty much from here on out till the end of Toad, we'll see it crush these stages. Especially like even in like in Toad and Drill, it goes all the way into the boss room itself. So. Wild weapon, and another good fight for ohon there. I think his shield was good. Did you catch it? I didn't see actually.
It was the shortest. He had a good RNG there. But meanwhile, on notriley screen, I'm gonna focus. Like earlier, I mentioned that Flash Stopper and Balloon are the two weapons or items that get used a ton during the run, and Balloon is like a very big part of it is that you can use Balloon to constantly jump up, which is quite a bit faster than climbing the ladder, as we can see here. But you can do a bunch of tricks with it. One that is not immediately obvious is that when you spawn it inside the wall, it will still have its hitbox for like 8 frames or whatever. You have pretty lenient timing to jump on it as long as you just learn the timing. And people do that a lot in different places, not only to just place it in tight spots, but to reduce lag. Because lag is a huge part of this speedrun. Mega Man 3 to 5 are pretty poorly optimized, and they lag like crazy. So just eliminating anything possible that's going on screen, killing enemies that aren't quite out in your way, it's pretty common. Because the lag is pretty insidious, or rather, it's hard to notice. If you play this game on emulate,
go ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. I assume you're talking about notriley, who got a much slower skull pattern. That's a quick sidetrack. Mega Man 4 is pretty RNG heavy. Like I think the most out of all NES Mega Man games. There are especially a few bosses that can take a ton of time if they just choose to. But yeah, lag reduction is if you play these games on an emulator, you can turn on like a lag frame counter that shows you how much time has passed during lag frames, which is what happens when the game can't process everything going on and has to slow down a bit for it to catch up. And if you visibly see the game slow down, you're already losing seconds, which is enormous in a speedrun setting. And even when it's barely noticeable, that you can barely tell that there's any lag going on at all, it's you can take half a second very quickly. And yeah, Riley not doing a great job catching up right now.
Yeah, it's got to be a little discouraging, but it's it's best 2 out of 3. So even if he plays really bad here, if he kind of gets his bearings, kind of gets it in his hands, warms up a little bit, he might come back strong. He's definitely capable of playing a really good game like that. And yeah, lag mitigation is a big thing for sure. You can definitely see it happening, and like you said, like it creeps up, right? Like you don't even like it's hard to tell exactly how bad it's hurting you. I actually had a buddy who picked up Mega Man 3, and he messaged me saying that he got a broken copy of it and needed to get a new copy because he picked Top Man first and went in, and just the whole game was slowing down like how it does. I was like, no, man, that's just the game.
Wait, we don't have game audio?
Oh, for the... Yeah, I'm not.
Let me see.
doing it.
Where's the button? It's very quiet. It's wait, what? Yeah, oh yeah, currently playing background music. Can I change this from the commentator panel? Do we need? Okay, we have a SpeedGaming admin on it, so hopefully we're gonna have that fixed soon.
Oh,
And yeah, talking.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, talking earlier about notriley kind of falling apart. It's I think he knows that he's at a point where he is very unlikely to catch up no matter how he plays. It's really hard to stay focused on that. Like a more clear example is we have seen a lot of players die to capsule while behind because at that, like, well, we'll get to it later, but the final capsule fight in the game is really dangerous, really easy to die in, and if you already know you've lost and you're just supposed to take it home, then it's hard to stay focused in that. The stream preview for me is extremely loud. Is the balance okay on actual stream?
Yeah, it was pretty loud for me too.
I'm gonna have to adjust this a bit to have you and the stream in any kind of balance.
Yeah, I can definitely hear the audio of the game okay. Okay, mine's got it going. So this particular stage is a really fun test of your movement, I feel like, especially that last screen, because you can make the whole freeze last the entire screen, if you like in one freeze without doing it again. If your movement's really good and you chain it up all right. And ohon's heading into Toad, another really movement-based stage with the flash stopper. Just getting nice clean slides so that way you can take it. Like this screen right here that he's in, you can also do it in one freeze. As you're kind of getting the hang of it, it's common to do it in two, but ohon actually taking a little safe on the back end of those platforms, not taking the slides. Still makes it through in one freeze anyway, though, which is remarkable to me.
Yeah, the Toad screens aren't as hard. It's the real test is the one notriley was on just a moment ago. Most of the screens in the game are like you use flash stopper and you shouldn't have much trouble getting through it all without it ending. But the last screen in real is just the right length that normally you run out of a flash in a huge jump at the end of the room. But if you're extremely good at like keeping your jumps compact, chaining your slides, you can have it last through the entire room. Which is actually sometimes kind of dangerous because there are some rocks falling at the end, and if you don't know exactly where your flash is gonna end, so yeah, it can throw you off a bit there.
Yeah, you kind of get in your hands where it's gonna unfreeze. Typically, it is over that pit. Sometimes if you mess up a little bit before or a little after, or just in leading up to the door in and of itself, you might see that boulder kind of fall. And it'll fall in such a way that you want to freeze while it's about to explode, so it doesn't, start slowing the game down. But yeah, it's pretty tricky. We have ohon going into the Cossack stages now. It's the beginning of the castle stages, and there are no more checkpoints for the bosses. If you die, you go all the way back to the middle. So castle stage deaths are pretty punishing, boss deaths in particular for that reason. The first two stages, Cossack 1 and 2, are pretty challenging. I feel like, and then the stage after is a nice little breather, but these first two stages I feel are pretty demanding. This one in particular demanding movement-wise, and the next stage also movement-wise, but very tightly routed as far as ammo and health goes.
Then going back to flash stopper for a bit, you mentioned freezing enemies with it, and actually a big part of why we're using it is that when you freeze enemies with flash stopper, the game doesn't have to do anything with them. Like they don't move, they don't animate, they don't anything. So that's a huge lag reduction on top of just getting them out of your way. Also, one thing that you don't see is that when a flash stopper going on, certain enemies don't even spawn at all. So for example, the last screen of Skull, you would have these flying enemies coming at you that you see on the first screen. but thanks to a flash stopper, you can just ignore those. But, yeah, castle stages. Most of the Mega Man games, the game kind of picks up in difficulty, both casually and in the speedrun. And one thing is that the game now knows you have all the weapons and can demand their usage. There's a lot more like spike pits that you have to go over and such. It's actually, even though how powerful flash stopper is in robot stages, the Toad stage that we saw on Notriley just now is actually the first time we use it. It doesn't come into play at all in the wider stages, largely because most of them require using Balloon or Rush Jet at some point. So when you're switching to those for Alpha stage anyway, there's kind of no returns in also switching to flash stopper, as each menu is like 1.5 seconds at least. So,
yeah, for sure. I feel like the tacos trash strat is like that too. There's a lot of cool things you could be doing, I feel like, if you didn't have to menu, which is why I feel like looking at Anniversary Collection, I haven't investigated it personally. I know people have messed with it a little bit, but I think being able to use weapons on the fly like that without the menus would open up some neat opportunities, but you might know about that more than I do.
I don't know about the re-release games, but if you look at the ROM hack speedruns, those almost invariably add quick switching. It's generally bound to select and up and select to go the other way, but that's actually one of the reasons I don't like running those myself, because it's logistically really hard on the original NES controller, which I want to use, but all the ROM hack runners generally play it on emulator and some other pad, where they have the weapon switch is bound to some kind of a pad trigger. So it's a pretty big disadvantage to play on the original controller. But you definitely do see more weapon usage. It's really noticeable in Mega Man 5, where you have Charge Kick, which is this weapon that isn't actually a weapon, but it gives you this invulnerable slide that you can use to damage enemies and go through them. And it looks amazing on paper, but it's actually usable in one spot during all of Mega Man 5 run, because switching weapons is so costly. But in ROM hacks, it's usually used a ton.
See, this is all stuff like I need to sink my teeth into one day. I'm still, like, Mega Man 4 is definitely the thing that I know even, like, not as much as you do about, even though I play it a lot. ohon, I believe, just got a 3-3, yeah.
He got a 3-3. We mentioned the boss RNG earlier, and this is the worst offender in the game.
Do you know the actual, like, odds that go into it?
I haven't confirmed it myself, but I've been told that it's 50% for 3 sweeps, 40% for 2, and 10% for 1.
Okay, and so I believe it's a 2-3 that's the most common, or a 3-2. I always forget. I don't know if that's like interchangeable.
Yeah, so the most likely pattern would be 3-3, but if you count 2-3 and 3-2 as equivalent, then I think that edges it out.
Ah, yeah, fair. So Cossack 3, I feel, it's the auto-scroller. Not much you can do to make it go faster other than a bit of lag control. Taking these enemies off screen if they drop, getting their drops. ohon jumping around anyway. The thing you could do there is just stay a little bit still, so that way the enemies scroll off screen before you begin moving.
Jumping doesn't really do anything. Like, you can pretty much jump and move by jumping all you want, and it doesn't really make a difference. It's if you get in the walking animation or slide, those are costly.
Oh, okay, so it's sliding and walking that really kind of triggers the slowdown versus the jump.
Yeah, I don't think I went too deep into that, but that's how I remember it at least. And it makes sense, because if you see what the game is doing, like when you're in the air, it's your sprite is static, it doesn't animate, doesn't do anything, you just move around, it's pretty cheap. Meanwhile, if you slide, you kick off this dust cloud that animates, and there isn't one extra thing to keep track of, and if you're moving, Mega Man animates through, so those are kind of things that the game has to work for. But yeah, like lag reduction is a pretty big part of the auto-scroller stage. It's it adds up if you compare, like knowing what to do and optimal strats, you can make a difference of several seconds. But for the most part, if you are aware of like what are the big issues and just do a reasonable job, then that gets you pretty close to the optimal time.
Yeah, I feel like the most dangerous thing about it when you're really familiar with this game is complacency. Like, but I mean, if you're on a good pace, typically you're going to be pretty alert, but it's definitely one of those situations where you have to wait. There's a lot of just kind of waiting around until you have to do the next thing.
No man, all sacrificing frames for swag. Doing air moonwalking to the boss fight.
Cockroach fight's pretty cool. It's a little back D boost there. Unfortunately got the extra bullets instead of the nice one bullet. The extra bullets cause a little lag. Pretty cool fight though. You take out the one on top and the bullet goes down and hits the one on bottom. It's pretty...
Yeah, the double hit in the middle, that never stops being cool.
Yes, it's always the best.
Even if it's a pretty small thing.
Yeah, and to answer that question in chat, yeah, the gap is pretty big now. ohon would have to make some pretty considerable mistakes, which for him as a runner is pretty unlikely. This is the best 2 out of 3, so it could go either way. Riley's having a pretty rough time of it right now, but if he plays well, it could go very well.
Yeah, I still think there are still spots left where like one could die realistically and not just by falling asleep, which would cost enough time for Riley to catch up, but this is ohon, he's just stupidly consistent, so I don't expect that to happen, but it's not quite over yet. A capsule, I think, is the biggest single one. Oh, well, that's not good.
Oh no.
I think notriley still wins if ohon dies to capsule, and notriley doesn't make any more major mistakes, but that's probably the only thing that can lose it anymore.
There's some timeline out there where I'm old and I'm telling my grandkids about the time ohon came over it in refights to machine. The legendary story. ohon controlling the catcher very well. If you want to talk about that too, sliding is just so weird.
Yeah, there are a couple of things unique to that fight. One is that since we're fighting the fake boss, that's like, whoa, it was Wily behind it all along, surprise spoilers. But yeah, so you don't actually kill him. The fight ends when he's on 2 HP. So actually it's slightly faster, that instead of full charges you use 2 uncharged shots, which puts him exactly at 2 HP. And you saw ohon end the fight by jumping left to from the platform, which puts him closer to the spot where he is going to walk into anyway during the cutscene automatically. So that's a little time save. The bigger thing during the fight is that when you start the slide, for some reason in the Japanese version of the game, it interrupts the current thing that the boss is doing. So by sliding constantly into the right edge of the screen, you can keep cancelling whatever the boss is doing. So if you've originally pulled him out of the wall a bit to the left, you can do that to like keep the capsule Cossack catcher in place and keep getting the shots in easily. It still is the mess up because you need to jump to hit him, and if he starts his movement during one of your jumps, he will have time to move a bit. But you can still kind of like slide back and forth on the left side of the platform if you let the boss reach a corner and switch sides, so it's not too bad, but it can go a bit off.
When it's going right, it doesn't feel very hard, but when it starts going wrong, it feels like it's getting out of control pretty fast, especially if he starts pinching you. You gotta be like, oh, you gotta, alright, well, let's really pay attention now instead of just sliding around, so. I mean, for these guys, it might not really be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I agree with it. I think it's rather one of those fights where you just gotta practice how to handle that, because there are a lot of things like that in speedruns where if you've never tried the backups, then it's obviously daunting and everything goes wrong and gets out of hand, but it's kind of a boring thing to practice. when everything's going right, you won't need it. So it's unlike the end up in a PB.
Yeah, fair. So okay, daddy now.
Okay, Cossack Catcher isn't like that big of a thing, but there are definitely some like that where you just don't bother. Like missing the balloon is a major example in this game, where it's actually faster to just keep going and use alternative strats everywhere in the game where you normally would use balloon, but nobody has practiced those.
Right, it's like 30-second difference. It's not too bad at all. I think, right? It's like not even that huge of a gap if you just play it through.
Baron timed it just like a week ago or so in a comparison video. I think it's less than 20. So I think it was slightly less than 20, but I forget already. But then on the other hand, I don't remember what the strats were like. I think Baron mentioned that some of them were pretty theoretical and maybe not something that anyone would go for RTA, but it's in that ballpark. And it's in any case, it's less than, well, not hugely less, but less than what you lose by restarting there. But generally, people are gonna restart in a race anyway because nobody practices those.
In the case of me doing like playing by myself in an event or something like that, typically I'll always just go back to get balloon just for the sake of an exhibition. But in a race setting, yeah, like I mean, it's definitely good to practice your backups. It's something I don't do as much as I should, as evidenced in my relay with the pro strats, quote unquote. But yeah, it's good to have those backups for races. Sometimes you can just get really into grinding really difficult, precise stuff without making plans. If you just have this like reset mentality, then you can get kind of fixed in that.
Okay, so coming up for ohon is Taco Thresh, a boss which has a couple of tricks you can do in it. Like normally you just shoot ring at him 7 times, but well, first hit comes here. If you jump through the air, you regain control inside the boss room until you touch the ground, and using the rain flush, it damages the boss during the health refill animation, which interrupts it and lets you start the fight early. Another thing you could do is equip Drill, which for some reason kills the boss's hitboxes, so you can stand inside him and just do the rest of the fight for free. It's faster to not do that, but it's really hard. It's like a top 10 runners of the game level stuff or something. It's basically it costs you the 1.5 seconds that it takes to menu, and to save time by skipping it, you need to lose less than that by taking damage or falling down or whatever during the fight, which goes faster than you'd think. It's if you're not familiar with, like, if you haven't speedrun yourself, it's hard to tell like what kind of things cost how much time. But generally, whatever you optimize the stages, it's tiny differences. Like using some stupidly hard strat to go through some screen in a completely different way, it might save like 1/4 of a second or something. But when you're inside the boss room and you just spend time waiting around, the clock ticks so fast in comparison. If you look at lower level players and compare to top runners, like the two things that where most of the time difference comes from is not like using fancy strats, but it's just basic movement, maximizing your sliding time, doing optimal jumps, and so on and so on. And the other one is boss fights. Like, the boss fights count for so much time. Speaking of basic movement, one thing that doesn't come up as often, or like isn't a cool, sexy thing, is that maximizing your sliding is absolutely huge in this game. Your sliding movement is roughly twice as fast as walking movement. So basically every pit in the game, you optimally want to jump as late as possible and land as early as possible. So if you want to save all the frames, every jump in the game is frame perfect trick. And if it's over a pit or spikes, it's also a trick that can kill you. And if you look at the very top runners, it's just crazy how close they get cut with the movement everywhere. So meanwhile, ohon is doing the refights. It's 4 has a pretty interesting refight route. You use different weapons than you normally would. Or well, you use in the Robot Master stages, and although you reuse some from Fight to Fight, for example, right now in Grillman, you get one hit in with a Rain Flash in the beginning, which does only 1 damage. But since Dive Missile does 3, it actually ends up saving 1 hit because in the first fight, in the first Grill fight, you eventually get him to 1 HP for the last hit, so Rain Flash is just as good as the last dive hit. Also, ring fight here is slightly different because you don't get to enter the boss room with a full charge, and also you want to end it on the left rather than in the center, and a bunch of small differences like that. So ohon playing it pretty safe here is at full HP. I think normally you take some intended damage boosts and end up a bit lower. Refilling health is pretty slow in this game. I believe each tick of your health or weapon energy is 8 frames to refill. So picking up a full health refill costs about somewhere around a second and a half, a little less. So here's one of the remaining places where you might die, the Wily Machine fight. The second, well, the first phase of the fight is pretty trivial. In the second fight, it's harder to dodge those shots. I think ohon has easily enough health that it's just not gonna happen. But if you lose your rhythm dodging those, it gets pretty dangerous. Also, optimally, you want to take the damage boost. You can dodge them, but it costs a bunch of time if you try to do it damageless. That was the old refight route. The new one is basically reversed. I don't remember. I already forgot the specifics. It's I don't think Shelny even recommended it for anyone outside like a word trigger attempt, but I think that was roughly the idea. Anyway, ohon about to enter the capsule fight, which I've been talking about earlier. This is the last chance for him to make a mistake that could let notriley catch up. So the only weapons that do damage to capsule are Fair, which is his weakness, and Ring, which deals 1 damage. And if you're careless, you can run out of weapon energy here. And the only way to refill it is like farm those enemies to kill early in the stage to kill them, or game over intentionally. And yeah, but everything goes right. It's a really quick fight, so before I could finish that, ohon has actually already completed the fight. And is this the button? Oops. Okay, so ohon wins the first one. I'm actually check like what notriley's PB is. Yeah, notriley's PB is 3741. So we like to talk about during these races about people's strategy, like what they focus on, what kind of strats they go for, and how you need to play in a race and such. But at the end of the day, it's gonna come down to whose time was faster, and when the other guy's race time beats your PB, there's little you're gonna do about that. And this is what we were talking about in the beginning of the race. ohon is just stupidly consistent in this game. It's like he just posts his sub 37.5 times every day. It's what a guy. Also, apparently I'm bad at using the stream interface. I think it's now fixed and we have it properly showing ohon having won the first one. Okay, So we're gonna take a couple of minutes then to have notriley finish the first run. He's also on pretty safe on health here, so unlikely to die on either on machine. So one thing I didn't mention earlier is that this is the second spot in the game where you can interrupt the boss health fielding. If you use drill to do the last point of damage to the machine first phase, the explosion is gonna stay around there to damage the second phase, which lets you do the same thing on the taco trash. It's kind of weird how that works out. You would kind of expect that would be used everywhere in the game, but most bosses appear with some kind of a delay, like robot masters drop from the ceiling, and most of the wild stage bosses have some kind of animation of them fading in or flying in or whatever. So they're just not going to be there early enough for any kind of a weapon effect to last on the screen long enough to give you that little glitch. But yeah, those are the two. While the machine stays in place after the first phase, and taco trash is already standing in the room as you enter. Now let's see if notriley has the capsule down. In addition to running out of weapon energy, which I mentioned earlier, the other risk is just dying, because every boss, like everything, does a ton of contact damage in Mega Man 4. So if you take a few unintentional hits, you're getting really low on health already. So one thing you saw there was notriley menuing after hitting with the floating sun thing, whatever. I guess I didn't touch on that earlier. One of the time saves actually from a fair first route is that you use a fair weapon on Brightman. It isn't actually a weakness or anything, it does exactly the same damage as Mega Buster, but since you can first hit with the floating thing above your head and then shoot the weapon normally, you get 2 hits out of each charge, so you save time that way. And in a capsule, the thing you can do is that you hit with the floating thing, then you menu before releasing B and then start charging again, so you can get hits in that way without spending your weapon energy. Which is a very good safety thing, because as mentioned, the capsule in 4 is a jerk and just doesn't take damage from almost anything, so if you run out of fair, you're just screwed. You basically have to game over, die intentionally to those worms on the first screen, which don't even do all that much damage. It's like 2 minutes at least if you mess up that way. But yeah, both runners taking it home. We are setting up the second race on Speedruns Live. So I'm actually gonna step away for a bit too. Be back in a moment for the second race. Alright, we have the second race set up here. Everything's ready, waiting for the runners. I think they're taking a very quick break before starting the next one, but we're ready whenever they are. Starting any moment now. Alright, and we are on to the second race as soon as the stream delay catches up. Right, so there's quite a bit of a buffer since we have fancy speed gaming systems that the streams are going through, which is really cool actually. But do I need to sync these a bit? Who was ahead? I think we're synced up now. Fixing the audio balance. Oh, left and right. I don't know if I can do anything about that. I hope some admins are listening to that. But yeah, getting back to the game, we once again are seeing Pharaoh and Bright first. Routes on our different runners, notriley4. Once again getting through the balloon pit safely, across the balloon pit. And I think that big time was in the beginning. Meanwhile, ohon, you can see getting across the spike rooms in Bright, just waiting for grasshoppers. I don't remember what strats notriley4 is going for in that stage. Fair first is actually still faster, even if you don't use balloon in Bright, which, well, for example, that's how I personally play this game. But for some additional savings, you can use balloons during the fair stage to get over those grasshoppers and kind of skip over the grasshopper RNG. So the grasshoppers can give you short or long jumps. And if you're not using balloons, you want them to jump long, which is, well, they move faster across the spikes. There's an old balloon route, which is roughly equal and roughly with the same RNG dependence as fair strats, where you want the grasshopper to do short jumps to cause less lag. But so there's a fairly recent new development there. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago or something, where Baron Haynes rerouted the balloon usage in Brightman stage, so the current strats you see in vertical attempts and such are much harder than the previous ones, but they are basically guaranteed to be faster than not using balloons, regardless of what the grasshoppers decide to do. So one danger if you go for really fancy balloon strats is that if you place them near the ceiling, you can get pushed into the ceiling and die that way. In Mega Man 4, I don't actually remember exactly how this changes between games, but if you somehow end up with the game deciding that you're in the wall, in the ceiling, the game's just gonna kill you. You can't just get inside the wall and get kicked right easily and quickly, like in the first 2 games where you do that all the time. Or when you do, it requires you taking a hit and getting some invulnerability frames. Okay, yeah, so notriley is going for the fair threats, as I kind of expected. So you get a bit of a saving from switching to fair early. You can kill these totem poles in fewer shots, which causes a bit less lag. And in the last screen you can shoot diagonals, which let you easier kill the floating enemies there. But it's not a big difference in how the stage plays compared to doing it with Buster in Bright First. And on screen you can see some fancy movement here in the last screen of Fair. You can see him moving fast really forward. He tried to spawn the first platform there and then jumping in place on the second platform. So he can kind of move back on it without causing extra lag to delay the mummy spawning, so he can get the easy kill there. So, some small things that are kind of hard to tell apart casually watching a stream. So both players are entering both fights roughly at the same time. notriley should have a faster fight since he's using Fair here instead of Mega Buster. So I think they're gonna end up pretty much even afterwards here. Okay, so ohon is going to be very slightly ahead. Misses the animation skip. I think I haven't talked about this during this race. So far you've been watching these end of stage animations. Those players into the middle of the screen and get teleported into the middle and go from there. Unlike later games where you just want to get roughly to the middle to skip some walking to there, in Mega Man 4, the check for the end animation is kind of sloppy, so if you end up exactly on the middle pixel where the game wants you to walk, without the game having to do it for you, it skips a part of the animation, where instead of jumping up and catching the floating bubbles, you just instantly teleport there, which is, I don't remember how much it is, like second and a half or something. Also, if you get the right pixel vertically too, it skips even more. Yeah, the kind of the bubbles flow through you, and you just immediately teleport without getting yourself taken to the middle, which it's a second and a half save on top of the like a half skip. Normally you can do that in Pharaoh, where there's the kind of platform in the middle of the room that takes you higher so you can reach a pixel. And in Dive, which is underwater, and you can just jump to the however high you want. In other stages, you would have to switch to Balloon Rush, which makes it harder to set up, and also the menu eats up half your savings, which is it's doable, but at the moment nobody's really going for it seriously. Oh man, it's been a while since I've seen this in any race, people just going neck and neck. So far, ohon is pulling ahead. He's definitely the more experienced runner here, so that's kind of what we expect to happen. If ohon doesn't mess up anything, notriley should expect to kind of follow closely behind, but for now we're definitely in a position where if ohon does mess up anything, it's definitely notriley's race to take. So the ring fight, completely scripted when everything goes right. Not exactly on notriley, but not a big loss there. It's a pretty scary fight. It's one of those that shouldn't be hard, but there's some tight movement there, and if you do slip up anywhere, you have no HP coming to the fight unless you get screwed by drops earlier, and you also have hardly any weapon energy, so if you do take that one hit, you're gonna run out and then have to do the fight again with Mega Buster, which you probably haven't practiced, and which is a lot slower. Forces you to some unfamiliar movement. It's annoying and takes a lot of time. So here we see the different dust threats. notriley's going for the fair threats that we talked during the first race. Those shots that he's doing to kill those enemies that appear from the pits are stupidly tight. Really easy to just have them almost look like they're going through them, which basically gets you knocked into the pit if you miss them and don't immediately realize what's happening. One of the biggest saves is that you get to kill more of those enemies in there, which reduces lag a ton. That's like one of the laggiest rooms in any of the Mega Man games, or like almost anything. It's not that bad in casual play, where you move slowly and probably only have one of those blocks forming at any given moment, but when you speedrun, when you keep sliding all the time, keep moving forward, you can have like 2 or 3 of them spawning at once, which is just a ton of stuff on the screen simultaneously, and the game just doesn't handle it. It's crazy laggy there. Ooh, also not right, getting the slide under the stomper there. It's again one of those small movement swings. That stomper can give you a short or a long jump. If he gives you a short jump, it's possible to slide underneath it, but it's I don't think it's frame perfect, but it's very, very close. Your movement needs to be almost optimal, at least, to make that slide. So not really catching up a bit in Dust stage. Not only keeping it close, reducing the gap. Also right now they are kind of getting into a bit of mid-game lull. Among the 8 robots, the first 4 are getting the most dangerous. Like in the PB attempts, you kind of reset all day long in those 4, and if you get through, you most likely get to the castles. Not to say that the other 4 stages aren't hard. There's definitely a lot of difficult movement in Skull, but generally if you mess up something in Skull, you can just take a hit and continue afterwards. Doesn't cost you a ton of time. Where the first 4 stages just they just don't have any forgiveness. You mess up something, you die, or you run out of ammo, or you just take your life in some way anyway. Also, Skull is a very cool stage in that it showcases both of the 2 major weapons in the run. You do the first half of the stage with balloons and the end of it with Bright. So long screen notriley is just finishing. This is another one of those screens where it's about to say another one of those screens where you can run out of Bright. It usually doesn't happen, but it's not unheard of, and just as I say, notriley gets some of those enemies broke from him. So notriley took some unintended hits during the stage, so he's again in a situation where he really doesn't want to take a hit from Skull. I think he can take one, but oh yeah, he's using normal strats where he doesn't take any intended hits here, so he took one, he survived it. All is good. But as you can see, the usual contact damage that anything does to you in Mega Man 4 is 8 ticks of health. You have 28 total, so what is it? You can take 3.5, or while your full health is 3.5 hits of it's worth, so you can take 3 before dying. Then we're getting to dive, underwater stage, another flash stopper stage. Another thing we didn't mention yet is that in Mega Man 4 and 5, if you're sliding in front of any kind of a foreground object, this would be like cloud sprites, ladders, water, you can jump out of your slides normally. If you press A during a slide here, nothing happens. So if you wanna keep your sliding movement, like one thing you can do is you can carefully position your slide so that you can finish all of them. You can see in the room notriley just passed, the platform where they kill the Met is exactly the right length for it, 4 tiles. So you can start a slide at the very front edge of it, and it will end at the very back end of it. Another thing you can do is you can cancel your slides. Before your slide ends, you stop it by turning around and then jump from there, which is if you haven't practiced it a lot, it takes a bunch of time, so you kind of don't want to bother practicing it if you're just a Mega Man 4 runner. But one thing that does make you learn it is playing Mega Man 6. where the physics are slightly different. You cannot jump out of slides anywhere. If you press A during a slide, it will just stop you in place, so you need to always cancel your slides, and it's a huge thing in that game. So generally people who run multiple Mega Man games and also know Mega Man 6 are gonna go for those slide cancels in the 2 underwater stages in Mega Man 4. Okay, so ohon is slightly missing the animation skip, and I think we saw a total of 0 of them out of them in this run. It's not super hard in Dive Man stage, but one thing that can throw you off is that the ending fanfare starts when all the sprites have left the screen, and it's not just the explosion bubbles from the boss, but also the little like oxygen bubble or gas bubble, whatever, breathing bubble that spawn from Mega Man periodically also counts. So if you want to end the fight optimally, you need to pay attention to where on the screen that bubble is currently moving, and you might want to do a short hop right as you kill the boss and to position it. But if you get too greedy, then obviously if it spawns right, despawns right before the explosion bubbles disappear, then you just made it the worst possible. And if you need to juggle that and getting the right pixel horizontally, which you can get sub-pixeled on, because well, the way the movement physics work in this game is that physics only care about full pixels, which is like the game resolution is like 256 times 256. But to get any kind of smooth movement differences, the game keeps track of your position closer, more precisely than that, which is it's not quite like a fractional position. There are some corner cases where it behaves kind of weirdly, but it's kind of the same thing as half a pixel. And Mega Man's walking movement speed is 1.3 pixels a frame. So if you get kind of a bad sub-pixel position, you can skip over the pixel on the ground that you want to end up on. And if that happens, you need to do a quick slide. Your sliding movement is well, it puts you on a different sub-pixel position because it kind of like doesn't it isn't exactly twice your walking movement speed, so you need to do that to kind of reset your position and then go again, and it's just a lot of things to do in a very short time frame. So here we see Drill doing his thing. We talked about the RNG earlier. Drill is the second biggest source of it in the run. After the first dive he does in the beginning of the fight, whether he dives or not is just completely random. If he decides to do it all the time, you get 2 hits in, and then he goes underground again, and then it takes, I don't know how much that is even, it's many seconds. And I think it's 0 to 4 times that he can do it during the fight. Something like that anyway. And yeah, not really a really bad drill pattern there. So most of the additional difference that ohon has made here just came from the drill fight alone. There's a sheet where people have cataloged the difference between the fastest and the slowest RNG patterns or whatever. And I think Mega Man 4's added up to like 100 seconds during the fall run. In practice, you're not gonna like see the differences between of 100 seconds because it's gonna even out. It's extremely unlike that you get the very worst possible or the very best possible. But there are a few individual instances of it that can make a huge, pretty big difference alone. Square Machine came up previously. I think that's like 12 seconds or so between the best and the worst patterns, which is somewhat realistic to happen. It's kind of a blessing and a curse that most of the Square Machine time saves come from getting the very best pattern, since well, he does either 1, 2, or 3 sweeps, and the first sweeps that he might skip are the faster ones. So it's something like 2 seconds for the fast sweep and 4 seconds for the middle sweep. So the difference between 1 and 2 is somewhere around twice as large as the difference between 2 and 3. So in the most likely case where you get 2s and 3s, it's not a big difference, but if someone does get 1s, then that's a pretty big time save there, immediately. Alright, so both players out of 8 robots with very good times. It's just a tiny differences in movement and a couple of bad boss RNG that not really good. Otherwise, they're almost neck and neck here. Also, the castle stages are going to offer more chances for big time losses. In the robot stages, there are not that many spots where you can get just really badly screwed by dying somewhere specific. The worst is Ring Man, where you kind of have all your energy routed, and if you die later on, actually, yeah, specifically if you die on the second Hippo mini-boss, that sends you back to the very beginning of the stage and you have already spent all your fair ammo, so that's a huge disaster, but for the most part, deaths in robot, well, common deaths in Robot Master stages are pretty cheap. Meanwhile, in castle stages, you often get sent back a huge number of screens, and also, since there are no energy refills, dying somewhere where you've already spent a lot of balloon energy in the section you need to redo can be a huge additional cost to the death. So the screen not rally on is one of the more difficult ones to do optimally. I think ohon was making it look easy, but it's actually really hard to get the really fast step there that ohon has been doing. Not really taking an easier version there. Okay, so I'm trying to find some kind of nice spot to get an accurate time comparison. Ohon got the flash in the castle animation on 2044, so notriley would be right now, what was that, 2101, so 17 seconds behind. He's unlikely to catch up if neither makes any mistakes, but that's definitely within the range of just ohon making a single mistake pretty much anywhere. Like, come on, he's due for 1 eventually. He can't just finish with like a billion runs and do no mistakes in any of them. But so far he seems to disagree with me. He's just doing consistent low 27s. This is insane. I think I casted his quarterfinal against Ahmad. I believe he got some low 27 in the second run, and in the first run he got 1 death somewhere, and it was only a low 28 or so. Which is like, even when he messes up somewhere, loses a lot of time, he's confident in the rest of the game that he will beat most people's PBs. Like, notriley is gonna have to go basically PB pace to beat even that version from ohon. So ohon is in somewhat dangerous waters here. He cannot take this hit here, but yeah, it's not super hard to dodge. So ohon got a 2-1 pattern there, also getting favorable RNG. I wasn't quite paying attention to notriley. I'm not sure if he got a 3 or 2 on the first swoop. Gets a 2 on the second one, so he's a bit behind here. Oh wait, he got a 1 on the first? I could swear I saw Machine just disappearing from the screen before it entered for Railbot. Oh. Okay, 2-2 for Riley. That sounds right, so that would be a 4-second difference or so. So ohon being sloppy here, getting himself killed in the beginning of the auto-scroller, evening it up a bit. It was immediate in the beginning of the stage, so didn't cost much, it's like a 15 seconds maybe. He's still ahead, but it's hit him out of the gap. So right now we're back to the range where we don't even need any additional big mistake from ohon. If he gets like that real RNG, that alone would account for the current gap here. Trying to think if there's anything to say about the current resource management or anything. Well, obviously, ohon has died once, but neither of them are in a spot where lives would be any kind of an issue. I don't think there's much of an issue with the weapon energy. I think notriley wasted some balloons before, but yeah, actually he's not supposed to even have any left. He gets a tiny time save if he has one for notriley4 to use there instead of coil. Yeah, he's out of balloons, but it barely matters. There are no like balloon stages to say. None of those left. So one neat little thing about the second half of the auto-scroller is we've been watching them get through it there with Fair spending 0 energy. So I keep mentioning that menus are really costly in this game, so you want to minimize those in your routing. In the auto-scroller, Cossack 3, most of us pick up the large refill at the end of the first half of the stage for Ring, which gets used a ton in the refights. Recently, there are a couple alternative energy routes through the castles where you might not pick up that and get tiny savings and cut extremely costly on your energy in the refights. But I don't think anyone's going for that in races at least. So generally you see the same kind of energy management in the castles. You switch the ring there, pick up a couple of... use it to kill the 2 crawler enemies in the middle screen, refill back to full on the second half, and then you need to get back to Fair for the boss fight. So using the floating Fair thing to kill the enemies on the second half of the auto-scroller kind of works out there. That lets you use the same weapon that you use for the boss. In most of the Mega Man games, the routing works out so that if you're gonna use a weapon during a stage, half the time it's the one that you're switching anyway to for the boss. Because again, the bosses are a much bigger deal than the stages themselves. If you do less damage to the boss, you need to wait more instances of invulnerability frames, which adds up just to a ton of time compared to what you can save by slightly faster movement in the stage. Or you kind of like, most of the time you will be moving anyway, you just move slightly faster, and it just doesn't make much of a difference as quickly as just standing around doing nothing compared to keeping the boss in iframes. So here you can see ohon kind of having trouble keeping the boss on any far end. He keeps moving back and forth the other side of the boss, but keeps it together very nicely, doesn't get caught at any point. The big possible time loss here is that the catcher can catch you in those claws and will keep you in place for a while, kind of stunned. Oh wait, I just realized notriley is playing on the US version of the game. I guess it isn't actually different. Generally you just see everyone using the Japanese versions of the games. and there are some very subtle differences depending on the game. I guess I might be misremembering things, and there are actually no gameplay differences. Mega Man 3 has some very weird individual ones where some very minor bug was fixed from the Japanese version to the American version. Most of the games it's just you get faster text in Japanese because typically there are no changes to how the text behaves, so it appears character by character, and each character takes the same amount of time regardless of whether it's Japanese or English, where you use more of them. So speaking of underwater slides earlier, here's the other opportunity to save a handful of frames with them in this room. You see notriley mostly not going for it. I believe he's only running Mega Man 4 out of these games. There are like a couple of 2-tile platforms where you could slide to, like say, well, yeah, frames. But it doesn't make much of a difference, even if you just walk. Also, you saw ohon jumping into the boss fight. Across all Mega Man games, when there's any kind of cutscene-like thing, it only starts when you're standing on ground. So if you're in the air or sliding, or moving on some kind of a 1-in-5 with super arrow, I don't think there are any others really that let you do that. You can delay spawning. So ohon jumped into the boss fight too, which costs a bit of time, but takes you closer to the boss in the beginning of the fight. So medality specifically, you can give you a long jump or a short jump, and generally you do get 4 hits on a short jump or 6 hits on a long jump, and you need 14 total. So to finish it in 3 cycles, you need 1 long jump, and you can't, which is pretty typical. So if you get 2 and 1, you can't miss any shots. It is just barely possible to get 5 on a short pattern, but it's just absurdly tight. Not many people go for it. Yeah, recapping the first race for the chat, notriley got a bunch of early deaths and seemed to get tilted. Which is a very common thing to happen here. Meanwhile, ohon finished with a 27-30 or something crazy like that. He's just not making it easy for anyone to beat that. I already forgot the exact time, but I did check that it was faster than notriley's PB, which is 27-40 something. 37, I mean, obviously, 37. Letting Mega Man 2 run some commentary. With this 20 times. Okay, so very good fight from ohon until that last hit he took. I think he ended up losing just enough time to kind of break even with the drill strat. Looks like notriley is not going for drill this time. I think I saw him do it in the first race. But yeah, there are 2 different attacks that Takotras can do. He can shoot a fireball from his mouth or lob the bomb across. And it's just really hard to keep yourself ready for either of them, so that no matter what happens, you would keep your position. If you do get knocked down or get knocked off the platform, if you choose to stand there instead of in front of him, it's you almost instantly lose all the time that you're saving from skipping the menu. Okay, so let's see. So ohon got that teleporter in at 33:10. So someone else is already looking at some other timing here. Getting 15 seconds from chat. Looks like notriley lost a bit more here in this stage, so it's 19, 20, something like that. So soon we're gonna see the big end game RNG sources. Ohon is getting the skull pattern here. Gets the fastest one again. I think that's a potential difference of about 4 seconds or so. Okay, notriley, it's not the fastest, but it's very close, so roughly almost no difference there. Then getting through a couple of fights, died with no randomness, bright with well, some randomness that doesn't really make a big difference. The fight can be a lot more or less awkward to execute depending on what he does, but it doesn't like cause big amounts of waiting like some of these. And the big one, we're gonna see how it will behave for ohon. Okay, so starting with a good pattern here. Gets a dive, still potential for one more if he does it instantly again. Doesn't do it, so ohon gets away with one additional dive. No man, notriley doesn't even do that jump buffering. Riley gets a dive here. I think if you eliminate all the time losses from randomness, they would actually be really close. notriley has clearly had worse luck during this run. Then ohon to the last big RNG thing. We didn't mention this earlier, but when Dust decides to suck, he goes invulnerable, so okay, there you go. ohon intentionally taking hits against him. Chooses not to pick up the health. So basically whenever Dust sucks, it's either a big time loss or you take 8 damage by intentionally running into him, and ohon did that twice, did not refill, so he's getting it close on the capsule fight now. He should be fine. He's top runner, obviously, but okay, and he makes it. You can actually die there after you lose control. The shots of the Y machine stay on screen even after you've got him to 0 health. So if you're low on health and careless, you can end up inside one of those shots after you finish him. Okay, notriley taking some extra damage there, but he could afford it. You generally just accept it and don't even try to dodge it if you don't need to. And with that, we're down to capsule. I think ohon has enough of a lead that just getting bad spawns will not cost him the race if he just stays on top of things and doesn't die or end up out of ammo. He also gets a random energy refill right before the door. Very hates a play from him, picking it up, getting some extra safety. And it looks like he's gonna pull this through. Okay, so double hit he went for there is extremely tight, so... Well, not extremely, but it's very easy to miss the second shot by shooting it slightly too early or late, but he had enough energy to afford it. Doesn't end up costing him anything, he just finishes on the next spawn anyway. And oh yeah, let's push the buttons on control panel. Wait, what? Okay, there we go. Second balloon. And all right, we continue the trend of higher seeds winning. Notriley pulled off one upset against Sage earlier, but which was oh yeah, I have this open. Yeah, so Notriley was the 5th seed after the qualifiers, beat the 4th seed Sage Hero in quarterfinals 2-0, which is as we went over in the beginning of the stream, the only upset so far in the tournament. But ohon continuing with the favorites winning here with a 2-0 victory in the semifinals. So I doubt ohon wants to hop on the stream. He has declined them previously. I believe he doesn't speak great English, so that's understandable. So I think we're going to be wrapping the stream. The other semifinal is Beko versus Preeti, our qualifier 2nd and 3rd seed, leaderboard 2nd and 4th. It's scheduled for, what is it? Noon EDT, so 24 hours and 20 minutes from now. So tune back for that tomorrow.